Hello, and now let's discuss today's topic, Tonight, quote, story begins with something almost ironic. Donald Trump, a man not exactly known for adapting quietly to uncomfortable environments, now finds himself walking straight into a political snowstorm in Washington. And in many ways, this is unfamiliar territory. Because while political pressure has always surrounded Trump, the kind of resistance he faces now feels different, colder, broader, more structural. The Wall Street Journal reports that President Trump plans to use tonight's address to sell the American public on one central idea: that the economy is strong, that progress is real, and that relief is on the way. He is expected to outline new measures aimed at lowering costs, stabilizing prices, and convincing Americans that their financial future is improving. But here's the problem. Large numbers of Americans simply do not feel that improvement. And in politics, perception almost always outweighs statistics. New polling shows the president's approval rating continuing to fall, and not just among Democrats, which would be expected, but among independents, the voters who ultimately decide elections in modern America. Roughly 2/3 of independent voters now believe the country is worse off than it was 1 year ago. That number alone should set off alarm bells across Washington, because independent voters are not ideological voters. They are transactional voters. They reward stability. They punish uncertainty. And right now, uncertainty is everywhere. Trump delivers this address at a moment when his administration faces challenges on nearly every front. His immigration crackdown, once considered one of his strongest political advantages, has become broadly unpopular with the general electorate. The Supreme Court has just delivered a significant blow by curtailing his sweeping tariff authority, a cornerstone of his economic nationalism. Foreign policy questions remain unresolved, particularly regarding Iran. And continued criticism surrounding the lack of transparency related to the Jeffrey Epstein files continues to fuel distrust among both critics and former supporters alike. Individually, each issue might be manageable. Together, they form a narrative, and narratives win or lose elections. The numbers tell a troubling story for Republicans. Support among Hispanic voters has declined. Non-college white voters, historically Trump's most reliable base, have softened. But the most alarming shift is happening among independents. Veteran political observers say they have rarely seen a president so deeply underwater with independent voters while appearing so unconcerned about it. That disconnect may be the most important political story unfolding right now, because normally presidents adjust. They recalibrate messaging, they pivot policy, they soften tone. Trump, however, appears largely unchanged. Off camera, he occasionally complains about polling coverage or media framing, but publicly there is little evidence of strategic correction. And that raises a fundamental question. Does Donald Trump believe the political warning signs are temporary, or does he simply believe they do not apply to him? So here's why this matters beyond daily headlines. Every serious pollster will tell you that the single most reliable predictor of midterm election outcomes is the sitting president's approval rating. When approval drops, congressional losses usually follow. And right now, Trump's approval numbers present a serious threat to Republicans competing in swing districts and battleground states. Low presidential approval acts like political gravity. It pulls everything downward. Candidates, messaging, momentum. We've seen presidents use major national addresses to reverse declining fortunes before. Joe Biden, several years ago, used consecutive State of the Union speeches to begin rebuilding public confidence after a difficult period. Those speeches didn't solve everything overnight, but they stabilized perception. Tonight raises the same question for Trump. Can one speech change political momentum, or has the trajectory already been set? What makes this moment remarkable is how quickly circumstances have shifted. Less than a year ago, Trump returned to Congress riding enormous political confidence. His first 100 days were described by allies as aggressive and transformative. He pursued expanded executive authority. He implemented key elements of long-planned conservative governance strategies. He projected dominance, at one point even highlighting figures like Elon Musk as symbolic representatives of innovation aligned with his vision. But tonight, as he returns to the Capitol, the environment feels dramatically different. Polling gains made after the 2024 election have eroded. Groups that once moved toward him, including segments of Black and Latino voters, have shifted away again. Perhaps most damaging, confidence in his economic stewardship has weakened, and economic trust was supposed to be his strongest asset. Americans increasingly say they do not feel financially secure. Prices still feel high, housing feels unreachable, everyday affordability remains a dominant anxiety, and when voters feel economic stress, political loyalty becomes fragile. Within Republican circles, one word appears repeatedly in private conversations: chaos. Not necessarily ideological disagreement, but exhaustion, a sense that political controversies arrive faster than solutions. Add foreign policy uncertainty, add legal battles, add internal party anxiety, and suddenly the governing narrative becomes defensive rather than confident. Equally important is who stands behind Trump tonight: the Vice President and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Republican lawmakers privately acknowledge a growing fear. If conditions do not change quickly, next year's address could feature a Democratic speaker behind the president, and that would fundamentally reshape the remainder of Trump's presidency. A Democratic-controlled House would bring investigative authority, subpoena power, and aggressive oversight. Presidential agendas slow dramatically under divided government. History makes that clear. There is another certainty about tonight. It will likely be long. Donald Trump already holds 4 of the 7 longest State of the Union-style addresses in American history. Length, however, does not equal persuasion, especially tonight, because seated directly in front of him will be Supreme Court justices, including those responsible for limiting his tariff policies. The visual symbolism alone carries tension. Will he confront the ruling indirectly? Will he challenge institutional resistance? Or will he pivot toward unity? No one truly knows. Current approval ratings hover in the low 40s overall. Among independents, closer to the mid-20s. Among Latino voters, barely above 20%. These numbers represent a dramatic collapse compared to the historic Republican gains Trump achieved only a year earlier. And again, everything circles back to the economy. Americans judge leadership through lived experience. If groceries feel expensive, if rent feels impossible, if wages feel stagnant, no speech can easily override daily reality. Some analysts argue the situation may actually be worse than polling suggests, because enthusiasm gaps are emerging. Democratic voters appear energized. Republican voters appear uncertain. Recent local and state elections show Democrats consistently outperforming expectations compared to previous cycles. That pattern historically signals danger ahead. Privately, many Republican strategists fear significant losses in November. Even Senate races once considered safe may become competitive. What frustrates many within Trump's own party is the perception that he does not share their urgency. Advisors reportedly plead with him: focus on affordability. Talk about cost of living. Address economic anxiety directly. Stop emphasizing tariffs. Stop revisiting geopolitical distractions. But Trump operates differently. He believes narrative strength creates political reality. He believes confidence projects victory. And tonight, observers expect him to declare success, describing America as entering a new golden era. Whether voters agree remains uncertain. Political punishment rarely happens instantly. It accumulates. One controversy changes little. 2 controversies raise questions. But sustained instability gradually reshapes public opinion. Voters connect patterns, they reassess trust, and eventually, elections reflect accumulated frustration. Trump governs largely through executive authority, executive orders, negotiation leverage, and personal political pressure. Legislation often takes a secondary role. From his perspective, congressional approval may feel less essential. He can act independently. He can move quickly. And even impeachment threats may carry limited personal concern, given historical precedent. But members of Congress live under different incentives. They face re-election every 2 years. They watch the same polling trends. And internal Republican surveys reportedly paint an even darker picture than public data. So tonight is more than a speech. It is a political stress test, not only for Donald Trump, but for the Republican Party itself. Can messaging shift public perception? Can economic confidence be restored? Can independence be won back, or are early signals pointing toward a larger electoral correction already underway? All eyes turn toward the Capitol. The chamber will be filled with applause, protest, calculation, and strategy. Supporters will hear strength, critics will hear denial, and millions of Americans watching at home will decide something simpler. Do they feel better about the future than they did before the speech began? Because ultimately, that feeling, not rhetoric, determines political survival. Tonight may not decide the next election, but it may reveal whether momentum is changing direction. Thank you for watching the video. So if you liked it, please subscribe and like so we have the motivation to make more videos.